Thomas Neill Cream was born in Glasgow, Scotland in 1850. His family moved to Quebec, Canada when he was just 4 years old. Raised near Quebec City, Cream was a bright student with a fascination for science, particularly chemistry and medicine. He studied at McGill University in Montreal, where he earned his medical degree in 1876. But even as a student, Cream's interest in poisons was more than academic. He experimented with chloroform and strychnine, not just in theory, but in practice. In Waterloo, Quebec, he impregnated a young woman named Flora Brooks. When she became ill after a botched abortion he performed, her father forced Cream to marry her at gunpoint. Cream fled the next day to England, abandoning Flora, who died shortly after. This was the first in a long line of women Cream would leave broken, or dead. Thomas Neill Cream was born in Glasgow, Scotland in 1850. His family moved to Quebec, Canada when he was just 4 years old. Raised near Quebec City, Cream was a bright student with a fascination for science, particularly chemistry and medicine. He studied at McGill University in Montreal, where he earned his medical degree in 1876. But even as a student, Cream's interest in poisons was more than academic. He experimented with chloroform and strychnine, not just in theory, but in practice. In Waterloo, Quebec, he impregnated a young woman named Flora Brooks. When she became ill after a botched abortion he performed, her father forced Cream to marry her at gunpoint. Cream fled the next day to England, abandoning Flora, who died shortly after. This was the first in a long line of women Cream would leave broken, or dead. Cream returned to North America and set up a medical practice in London, Ontario. He performed illegal abortions and treated vulnerable women, often those society ignored. In 1879, the body of Kate Gardner was found behind his office, a bottle of chloroform beside her. Cream admitted to seeing her, but denied involvement. The jury ruled she died from chloroform administered by person or persons unknown. Suspicion grew, but Cream moved on, this time to Chicago. There, he continued his pattern, offering abortions, sedating patients, and leaving behind corpses. In 1881, Daniel Stott died after Cream prescribed strychnine. Cream tried to frame the pharmacist. He was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, but was released early in 1891 under suspicious circumstances. Cream then traveled to London, England, and the real nightmare began. In London, Cream adopted the alias Dr. Neill and settled in Lambeth. He stalked the streets at night, targeting sex workers and vulnerable women. His victims included Matilda Clover, Alice Marsh, and Emma Shrevell. Clover died after ingesting pills Cream had given her. Marsh and Shrevell were found dead in their apartment, poisoned. Cream left cryptic notes and made anonymous accusations to the police, trying to frame others. He even offered to show detectives the murder sites, a move that raised suspicions. Scotland Yard began tailing him. They tracked his movements, interviewed witnesses, and exhumed bodies. Slowly, the net closed around him. Scotland Yard struggled to connect the dots. The victims were scattered, the methods varied, and Cream's respectable appearance made him difficult to suspect. But behind closed doors, detectives began to notice a pattern. Women poisoned, cryptic notes, and a man who seemed to know too much. Cream had a habit of inserting himself into the investigation. He wrote anonymous letters to the police, accusing innocent men of the murders. He even offered to guide detectives to the crime scenes, claiming insider knowledge. These actions raised suspicions. Scotland Yard began tailing him, watching his movements, interviewing witnesses, and collecting evidence. They exhumed bodies, analyzed prescriptions, and traced his aliases. Slowly, the net began to tighten. In June 1892, Thomas Neill Cream was arrested. The man who had hidden behind a doctor's title for years was finally exposed. But what came next would shock the world. Thomas Neill Cream was not just a killer, he was a manipulator, a narcissist, and a sadist. He enjoyed power over life and death. His victims were chosen for their vulnerability, and his medical knowledge gave him complete control. Cream often inserted himself into investigations, writing anonymous letters to the police and newspapers. He accused innocent men of the very crimes he committed, feeding off the chaos and confusion. His need for attention was pathological. He didn't just want to kill, he wanted to be known for it. His final claim, "I am Jack the Ripper," was likely not a confession, but a desperate attempt to be remembered. Records show Cream was imprisoned in Illinois during the Ripper murders. But the psychological parallels are haunting. Both targeted women, both operated in London, and both left behind fear and mystery. Cream's crimes were calculated, cold, and theatrical. He was a man who believed he was smarter than everyone else. And for a time, he was. Victorian London was already gripped by fear. Jack the Ripper had vanished, but the wounds he left behind were still fresh. When women began dying again, this time by poison, the city trembled. The victims were not mutilated, but they were just as dead. And the killer, once again, seemed to vanish into the fog. Newspapers speculated wildly. Was the Ripper back? Was this a copycat? The press fed the panic, printing lurid headlines and sensational theories. Scotland Yard faced immense pressure. The public demanded answers, and the police struggled to keep up. Prostitutes began cooperating with investigators, sharing descriptions and suspicions. The streets of Lambeth became a battleground between fear and survival. Every alley held a whisper. Every stranger was a suspect. And in the shadows, Thomas Neill Cream watched it all unfold. With satisfaction, Thomas Neill Cream was arrested in June 1892. The trial that followed was nothing short of sensational. Witnesses described his cold demeanor, his obsession with poisons, and his disturbing writings. The prosecution presented letters, prescriptions, and testimonies that painted a chilling portrait of a man who used medicine as a weapon. Cream remained composed throughout the proceedings, often smirking as evidence was read aloud. The jury deliberated for hours, but the outcome was clear. He was found guilty of multiple murders and sentenced to death. On November 15, 1892, Cream was hanged at Newgate Prison. As the noose tightened, he allegedly uttered the words, "I am Jack." The hangman, James Billington, claimed those were his final words. But official records dispute it. Was it a confession or a final performance from a man obsessed with infamy? Whether true or not, the statement added another layer of mystery to an already disturbing legacy.